If you're like me and you think it's highly likely that only the top 9 teams in the competition can play finals, that means, of course, the other 9 have got a chance to do something relatively special, and that is try to wreck some seasons, become the season enders. Now, for some clubs, that'll actually become vitally important, whilst for others, trying to get the best draft pick they can is going to be a high priority for possibly their supporters, maybe more than the clubs themselves. Yes, having a high pick is all well and good. You've still got to make the right decisions, though. However, I thought with 2 months to go in the season, let's take a look at the two biggest dangers when it comes to ending seasons, and two clubs that could also do this as a little bit of a wild card. So let's talk about it. Now, the two clubs that I'm going to be talking about are Port Adelaide and Sydney. 7 and 8 for the Power, 6 and 9 for the Swans, 10th and 12th on the ladder. So, of course, if you're thinking that maybe there are 10 or maybe 11 teams that are vying for final spots, it's fair to assume that you've got the top 9 in place and one, if not both, of these sides in your calculations. And to be honest, I can understand why. A couple of reasons that these teams have got in common in terms of why the heck they don't need to tank or lose or deliberately lose or trial out youth or do anything that may be putting a week-to-week result in jeopardy. But also, there's a little bit of pride on the line here. Yes, you've got Port Adelaide's Ken Hinkley to Josh Carr transition that is going to be monitored in a big way, but Ken's got nothing to lose at this point. Whether he does, say, for example, says, screw the rebuild because this is my last year, I want to go as far as we can, he has the license to do that. Whereas Sydney, their draft means nothing because they have 4 major academy players that they are going to be looking at taking in this draft. So let's start with the Swans. So Max King is definitely going to be looking like a top 10 draft pick. In the recent game for the Allies in the under-18s, where I think they played Western Australia off the top of my head, yes, they did. Max King kicked 2 goals, 3, didn't have a whole lot of the ball, but the athletic profile just suggests that he is going to be around that mark, and I highly suspect that Noah Chamberlain and Lockie Carmichael are going to be in that top 25, top 30 range. I would probably have them both in the 25 to 30 range, to be honest, if I was doing power rankings, which is, of course, very difficult, very different, I should say, than mock drafts, because I do not think those two things coexist in any kind of way. No one thinks that every club is going to take the best player available at their spot. Sometimes you try to fill a spot, rightly or wrongly. Now, they've also got Harry Kyle, who is a halfback flanker, who I don't really have in my top 40 at this point, but other clubs may, and he is also going to be one that is going to be on Sydney's radar. So it effectively doesn't really matter where the Swans end up on the ladder, especially considering if they stay where they are, if they finish 12th, they, of course, are going to have pick 7 in this draft. And I think Max King is going to get bid on before then. Because of that raw athleticism, I think it would be foolhardy for teams to let Sydney use that pick 7 on someone who's not in the academy, and then at pick, say, 9, for example, bid on King. That would be ridiculous, right? A lot of people gave Essendon criticism for the Kako trade, but anyone with more than 1.5 brain cells knows that if they didn't make that trade with Melbourne, then they would have sacrificed that pick anyway, and it would have been pointless. They got Kako effectively for free and moved their pick to next year. It is a win for Melbourne also because Lindsay and Langford both look like good players, and odds are Essendon are going to get 2 good ones before picking up Adam Swede and Hussein El-Hakar in this draft, who kicked 6, that's the same as it was on the weekend for Calder Cannons, and Adam Swede had 34 disposals. Win-win across the board, it looks like. Whereas you look at Port's situation, and they have no first-round pick this year. That's, of course, tied up with Gold Coast, and they have Dougie Cochran coming into next year's draft. Why the hell does that matter? Well, think of everything that I said about Max King for the Swans, and that'll pretty much apply to Port Adelaide next year. Yes, you've got Cody Walker and Kobe Buick, who are coming through next year, of course, for Carlton and Essendon, although the report came out. And in fact, one of my commenters actually put about the Cody Walker to Richmond thing before the journos did. So shout out to you. Sorry, I haven't gone back and checked who you were, but credit to you for that. But effectively, their first round pick next year is not going to mean squat because it's going to be absorbed probably for Cochrane. Now, does that mean Port Adelaide could try and trade into the first round of this draft? Yes, it could. Do I think they should do that? Absolutely, I think they should, because they're going to effectively get that pick for free anyway. Port Adelaide highly likely are maybe not going to be a top 4 team next year. So you're looking at a club that may want to get a pick in next year's draft. You could be looking at someone like Brisbane, who could be a win-win there, because although they're going to need the points for Annabelle and a couple of other of their academy kids that are sitting outside of that 2025 range, they have yet another academy star coming in next year through that midfield. So effectively, the point that I'm trying to make here is that Port Adelaide and the Swans have got no incentive to lose. Arguably, that is going to be the exact same boat for my two wildcard teams, who are Carlton and Melbourne. Neither of those have their first round pick this year, so what the heck is their incentive to lose? Not much. I just don't think they've got the talent in order to get on a roll in quite the same way. If I did, though, I would say Melbourne have got a good chance to wreck a couple of seasons. I just don't think in the same way that the 10th and 12th ranked sides in Port Adelaide and Sydney can. That's just my opinion, Melbourne fans. Happy to be proven wrong if you get on a run, and you can come back into the comment section and say, up yours, Daz. I'm okay if you do that. And on exposed form, I went back and had a look at the last 5 games, and in terms of differential, because as you guys know, I don't really give a stuff if you're really good at a statistic. If you're also really bad at conceding it, then I don't really think you're that far of a net positive or a net negative there. If you're the 3rd best kicking team in the competition, but you concede the 2nd best kicking efficiency in the competition, does that make you a good side? Well, I would argue not particularly. So I do like my differentials. And let's start with Port over the last 5 weeks. Now, of course, they are 5-5 over their last 10, which is very encouraging. But in just the last 5 games, they are going at 3rd in uncontested ball, 5th in retention rating by foot, 6th in handball receives, and 8th in meters gained. They are clearly looking to transition and move the ball quite well. I think of the Melbourne game as one that stands out in terms of the electric way they were able to move the footy. They're also 3rd in the competition from scoring from their defensive half. They're 4th for marks inside 50. Hello, Mitch Georgiades. And they're 6th for scoring from centre bounce. Port are a much improved side, and I think they are a better side at home at Adelaide Oval than they are on the road. I know they beat the Giants away from home, so Port fans, don't come at me from this is a positive piece about you, I assure you. I just think, though, no matter where they're playing, that they are going to be a dangerous team. Do I think they can make finals? I think it's more unlikely than likely, but could they wreck some along the way? Yeah, they could, because check out who they play in the last 2 months. They've got Brisbane, West Coast, Hawthorn, Adelaide, Geelong, Freo, Carlton, and Gold Coast. Effectively, if you take out the trash, I apologise for that terminology, but in terms of seasons they could derail, you're looking at Brisbane, Hawthorn, Adelaide, Geelong, Freo, and Gold Coast. That's 6 of the last 8 games. They have a genuine chance to disrupt some teams' top 4, home finals, or even finals opportunities. Of those top 6 sides, how convinced are you that any of them are definitely going to finish top 4? How many of them are you definitely thinking are going to finish top 8? How many of those are you definitely thinking are going to play in a home final? For me, honestly, Brisbane I am relatively confident in, and that is about it. One of the good things, and you might think of it as a bad thing as well, about the top 8 this year is that every team is inherently flawed. Yes, I think including the Pies, just not nearly as much as any other team, which is probably why they're 10 points clear on the ladder. And then you look at the Swans in their last 5 games, and they're 3rd in contested ball, 4th in first possession, 6th, I should say, in loose ball gets, and 8th in ground ball, as well as 3rd in stoppage clearances, 5th in centre clearances, 5th in post-clearance contested ball, and 6th in post-clearance ground ball. When the going gets tough, the Swans are getting tougher. Yes, they're only 4 and 6 in their last 10, but considering they are getting personnel back, they are finally somewhat living up to the potential. They played really well, ironically, against Port Adelaide only a fortnight ago, and I thought they were excellent against the Bulldogs. They just got beaten by a better side, and ironically enough, considering they were the home team, the surface didn't really help either, especially considering that Nick Blakey and Justin McInerney and a couple of the defenders as well were slipping over, probably more so than the Bulldogs players were at that Paddington end. But in their last 8, they've got Freo, St Kilda, North Melbourne, GWS, the Bombers, Brisbane, Geelong, and West Coast. Again, if you take out the sides that are a little bit irrelevant in this conversation, you've got Freo, GWS, Brisbane, and Geelong. 2 things that stand out amongst that crew. The first one is the fact that 3 out of 4 of these teams, so you've got Freo, Brisbane, and Geelong, play both of these sides. So in terms of probably Freo for a top 8 spot, you're looking at Brisbane and Geelong for your top 4 spots. These couple of games are the ones where that is what is going to be the separator between either top 4 home finals, or like I said, maybe for 1 or even 2 of those sides, if you want to believe that, their positioning on the ladder is going to be key. I cannot state this enough. For the last 2 months of the year, your form is actually less relevant than you think. but it is more about who you play and where you play them is going to make a bigger difference in where you end up on the ladder. Think of it like poker, right? If you are the 8th best player in a poker tournament, you're feeling pretty good. If you're the 8th best person on the final table, you're screwed. And just to kind of further that point, I went back through the last 5 seasons, so 20 to 24, and I had a look at how the last team that got into the finals, so 8th on the ladder, compared finishing the season to the team that finished 9th. Now, for one of these seasons, I did 7th, 8th, and 9th because the season was so close. But teams that finish 8th don't drop off a cliff no matter what is happening underneath them. But also, the amount of teams that finish 9th that finish the season badly is extraordinary. The only real exception to the getting on a roll bit is going to be Melbourne, ironically, in 2020. Collingwood were 2-2, which is not terrible, as we know. When Melbourne were 3-1, they just couldn't make up the difference. You then go to 21, where the Bombers were 3-1, but West Coast were 4 and missed out. The Bulldogs went 2-2 in 22, and Carlton were 4. GWS were 2-2, Sydney were 3-1, and the Bulldogs couldn't quite catch them, ending the season 2-2. And last year, even though Carlton were 1-3 and Collingwood were 3-1, they couldn't make up the difference. But let's be honest, Carlton did sneak in because Freo shat the bed and went 0-4. So effectively, Freo, Brisbane, and Geelong are going to be the 3 teams on the lookout because they play both of them. And it's going to be more about which team misses out. Like I said at the start of the video, I'm a big believer in whoever finishes 9th is probably going to be one of the better finishing 9th place teams on the ladder. But effectively, Collingwood aside, whoever misses out on finals is not going to be for anything other than completely butchering this last 2 months. So if you barrack for a team that is in the running, go and check who they play in the last 8 games and tell me how confident you are that they're going to win. Because you're going to struggle to find, because some of those top 9 teams are going to play each other and they'll even out across the board. That's how the ladder usually works. It's the games you should win that are going to cause that separation. So that's what I think, guys. Comment below what you think. Like the video if you like the video. And shout out the first ever Daz Talks Footy video with a live studio audience. Just off camera here. Baby Amelia, 4 days old, sleeping soundly right now. And what a gorgeous studio audience I have right now. I'm so proud of my girls. Mum's doing excellently. Bubs is doing fantastically. Daz is a little bit tired. And I think she's about to wake up. So I'm going to go tend to her. I am pumped for Thursday night footy. North Melbourne, Western Bulldogs. You have yourselves a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next one.